Alright, today we're going to look at solving matrix equations. So this would be if we have matrix A times matrix X equals matrix B, we're going to want to solve and figure out what matrix X is. The way we're going to do this is using inverse matrices. If you think about when we have 2x equals 6, when we just have a basic algebra problem, in order to get x by itself, we would divide by 2. However, with matrices, we can't divide. We're going to have to use inverses. So we're going to say, okay, instead of doing this, we're going to multiply by the inverse of 2. So we'll have 2 times the inverse of 2, which is 1/2, times x, equals that inverse times 6. So when we look at that, we've multiplied by the inverse. We multiplied by the inverse on both sides. 2 times its inverse gives us 1, which is our identity, or just x. It'll give us 1x, but we just write it as x. Then the inverse times 6 would give us 3. So all we did here was we multiplied both sides by the inverse of 2. We're going to do that same thing with matrices. So when we have matrix A times matrix X equals matrix B, we're going to multiply both by the inverse, so times A inverse times A inverse. So when we do that, A times A inverse will give me the identity times matrix X will equal A inverse times B. The identity matrix times matrix X is just matrix X. So X will equal A inverse times B. This is going to be what we go off of and what we talk about. You'll hear me say A inverse B over and over again. That's kind of the essential part of how we're going to solve these equations. So for example, if I have the matrix 2, -7, -1, 4 times matrix X equals -21, 3, 12, -2. And I want to solve this for matrix X. Here's my matrix A. Here's my matrix B. So we've got A times X equals B. So we're starting exactly where we are up here. So we're going to have to multiply both sides by the inverse of A. So we know from this that X is going to be equal to A inverse B. So we know matrix X will be equal to A, 2, -7, -1, 4, inverse. So the inverse of A. So we know that -1 is an exponent, denotes inverse. So A inverse times matrix B, which is -21, 3, 12, -2. So we're going to type that into our calculator to see what our X matrix would be. So we'll hit alpha zoom. This is a 2 by 2. So we'll type in 2, -7, -1, 4. Make sure we go outside the matrix. Hit our inverse button, which is this X to the -1 right here below math. It's in our inverse. Then we're going to type in matrix B, so alpha zoom, down to OK. Now we're going to type in -21, 3, 12, -2. So we have our second matrix. So now our screen looks exactly like our paper. A inverse times B. Hit enter, and that will give me that matrix X is equal to 0, -2, 3, -1. Okay, so that's if you're just given a basic matrix equation. It already has the matrices there for you. You're just solving for this X matrix. That's a matrix, we just don't have any elements filled into it. The next thing we're going to look at is our system of linear equations. So this is looking back at the type of equations we would have when we did substitution, elimination, and graphing. So if we have 2x minus 3y equals 19, and x plus 4y equals -7. Okay, we could do substitution. We can make this an x equals. We could do elimination and multiply my bottom equation by -2. Or we can now use matrices. So in order to set up your matrix, matrix A is going to be your coefficient matrix. So matrix A is your coefficient matrix. So you're going to look at your coefficients. We've got coefficients of, steal another pen, of 2, -3, 1, and +4. So we're going to plug those into my matrix A. So 2, -3, making sure you keep the sign. If it's a minus, that minus is going to be a negative that goes with the 3. 1, because that coefficient of x is 1. 4. My X matrix is my variables. Well, if you notice, my variables are X and Y. So we're going to write them in vertical order. So since X comes first, it's going to come on top. Y comes second, it goes on the bottom. XY equals my answer matrix will be matrix B. So my answers, 19 and -7, will be my matrix B. So here's my A matrix times my X matrix equals my B matrix. Now you notice this is a 2 by 2 and a 2 by 1 and another 2 by 1. This is going to work out because of the 2 by 2 and 2 by 1. There are situations where you can't do this, however, we're not going to be looking at those in this course this year. So again, we need to do A inverse times B, so xy will be equal to 2, negative 3, 1, 4 inverse times 19, negative 7. So we'll type that into our calculator. So we go alpha zoom, get our matrix, we get 2, negative 3, 1, 4. Go outside, hit the inverse button. Alpha zoom, oops, back on the screen. Now this is a 2 by 1 since we have 2 rows and only 1 column, so we're going to change it to a 2 by 1 to type in our answer matrix, 19 and negative 7. And when we hit enter, we get 5, negative 3. So that's telling me that xy is 5, negative 3. So my solution is the coordinate point 5, comma, negative 3. Again, we can go back in and check it. 2 times 5 is 10. Minus negative 9, which would be plus 9, so 10 plus 9 is 19. 5 minus 12, because 4 times negative 3 is negative 12, so 5 minus 12 is negative 7. It works, so we know this is the solution to our system. So all we did is we took our coefficients, put those into matrix A. Our variables became my X matrix, or my X matrix, and my answers became my B matrix. To get the variables, we're going to do A inverse times B. So the inverse of our coefficients times B. It is very important that you do it as A inverse times B. You cannot do B times A inverse. That will not work. So you have to do A inverse times B. The way matrices multiply together, the order does matter. So on these, you need to make sure you do A inverse times B. Otherwise, you're going to get an error when you go through and solve these problems.